cyberspace. And I think that currencies aren't going away as long as governments are with us. And I'm going to hope the government will stick around, because I think there's some good things about having a government. And when the dust settles, you're going to have maybe $100 trillion worth of pure monetary energy in Bitcoin. You're going to have $100 trillion worth of stocks, or 200 trillion, and there'll be price discovery. The value of the stock should decrease until the returns or expected risk-adjusted returns on the stocks are rational. You would expect the value of bonds would decrease such that the coupon on the bond is rational. That is called price discovery, returning to those markets. You would expect that the value of gold will decrease, or will start to equalize to its ornamental value. What is it worth to you as an ornament? What's your art worth as an ornament? What is your beach house worth for your value and use? And then there'll be a layer of cash and dollars and euros and pesos and yen and yuan that will circulate around, and that layer of cash will probably not hold value.
Okay, well, I don't know where he's getting, $100 trillion worth of monetary energy from, because it's really hard to predict that number, because we don't know how many dollars are going to be created, right? And that's part of the irony here, which is that, we know how many Bitcoins are going to be created, but we have no idea how many dollars are going to be created. So it's really hard to forecast the long-term value of a Bitcoin, first of all, or of the entire Bitcoin monetary network as a whole, right? 21 million Bitcoins. It's really hard to forecast that. So I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say $100 trillion, but I wouldn't necessarily say any number that's higher or lower. Like there's no other number that I would pick instead. It's just, it really is going to depend on what the central banks do and how many dollars we create. In terms of the specific changes that Michael sees in each asset class, like, stocks revaluing, bonds revaluing, gold revaluing, and so forth over time, in general, yes, I would agree with him. That's sort of a process that is constantly happening. One could argue, and I might even be one, one could argue that stocks are kind of always fairly valued. And if you think they're unfairly valued, it's just your valuation metric is off. You know what I mean? Like, if you think stocks are too cheap, then buy them. And if you think they're too expensive, then sell them. And that's what everyone in the economy is doing at all times, right? And it's not just stocks, it's any asset, right? So, it's kind of, it's depending on your stance, depending on your philosophy, it's hard to say that anything is over or undervalued. Depending how you define those terms. But yeah, I think the price of stocks and bonds will move in the way that he talked about. But he mentioned gold. The price of gold will move to its ornamental value. And I think gold has ornamental, decorative value, but also industrial value and monetary value. So like all three. And besides monetary value, well, you could say crisis value, but you might include crisis value in monetary. That might be one big category. And of course, there could even be other values. I guess those are like the biggest three buckets. But he didn't mention industrial value, which I thought was kind of strange, because if gold does lose its sort of monetary dominance, which is happening slowly. It's happening. I don't think it'll happen forever. But if it does start or continue to lose its monetary dominance, gold will approach its ornamental plus industrial value, which is significantly higher than just ornamental value. So that's maybe a minor quibble. Maybe that's not like the main crux of his argument here. But it is worth noting that gold has utility, right, in dentistry and aerospace and electronics and so forth, and maybe even future industries. I'm sure, guaranteed future industries, definitely. But I think in the super, super, super long term, like much longer than 100 years, I think gold will reclaim some of that monetary value. Like basically a store of energy value. I think it will in the long term, but I mean we won't be around to evaluate it or debate it.
So also earlier you mentioned something about scarcity, tying it to thinking about precious metals, right? Like yeah, in the near term, they're probably going to do good and go up. But long term, there's a non-trivial effort going into asteroid mining right now. One person gets it right. One group of people get that right, and they start bringing payloads back. Let's say they hire Elon Musk and say, you've got a lot of assets up there. Help me get this stuff from A to B. And all of a sudden, we've got a steady stream, 24 hours, bringing precious metals to the planet. There's more platinum on one asteroid than we've ever mined on planet Earth. So I think precious metals long-term don't make sense forever. But Bitcoin, could get thousands of years out of it, right? Depends on what happens to humanity, I guess.
Look, the problem is, if I want a system of mathematics or engineering, it needs to be based on arithmetic, mathematical integrity, or conservation of energy. It can't be based upon an analog approximation of integrity. Like, it's really hard for us to find rocks, and we found 21 rocks. And we're going to, as long as nobody finds a 22nd rock, then we're going to add up to 21. It can't be an approximation, which is what gold is. It needs to be an exact thing. So Bitcoin, arithmetic is a protocol. Bitcoin is a protocol. English is a protocol. A language is a protocol, right? If everybody agrees to move their money around in Bitcoin, 1,000 years from now, we'll be storing our money in Bitcoin. So worrying about whether we find some more silver or some more gold, right, is kind of silly, right? It's like, the truth is, we just should abandon commodity monies in the same way that you abandon the abacus, or I don't know. I'm trying to imagine like caveman with like 47 rocks in the dirt. And they're like, this is our way of keeping track of what we have. And at night, there's someone standing guard over the 42 rocks to make sure that someone doesn't accidentally drop a 43rd rock and destabilize the power structure. And it's like, that's, it's an open system, not a closed system. It's defective. And it's kind of like just changing the rules of arithmetic. Your bridge is going to crash. Your ship is going to sink. Your airplane is going to crash and burn. And so if you're saving your money in gold, it's the modern equivalent of saving your money in the giant stone coin of the Yap people. And as long as no Westerner in a ship shows up with other stones, you're going to be fine. You think about it, and the asteroid mining thing is the equivalent of, what if someone shows up with a ship with glass beads or seashells or
it's exactly the same
coins
thing.
And it crashes our economy?
Yeah.
And the answer is, maybe if you actually had computers and arithmetic, you should have used the computers and arithmetic to base your economy on, and not stone coins of the Yap people.
Okay, interesting. So, yeah, Michael Saylor's pretty opinionated on this one, basically saying it's just really stupid to put your money in gold. So, okay, definitely a strong opinion. Well, those of you who know that I have gold probably can guess that I don't fully agree with him here. But I see what he's saying, and I don't think he's necessarily wrong to make such a comparison, that gold is outdated as a monetary technology. Yeah, it definitely could be. But with any technology, there's the risk that it fails, right? And sometimes the new technology doesn't work, and we have to go back to the old one until we can come up with another version of a new technology. That happens all the time. Most new technologies fail. And for those of you who don't know, we have found a bug in the Bitcoin protocol, and there was a time when someone created more than 21 million Bitcoins, and we had to fix it. So could that happen again? Maybe, probably not in the same way, but there could be other bugs. So, we just don't know. Nothing is a guarantee. So I choose to put some of my wealth in gold in case there's a problem with Bitcoin, whether it's the Bitcoin protocol or electricity in general, or who knows what. Some type of black swan that I can't even imagine. I think it's pretty easy to imagine, some of the previous monetary systems, like the beads and the stones and so forth. It's pretty easy to imagine how they collapse, because those civilizations encounter other civilizations that can produce the same monetary units with very little energy. So in other words, if it takes your civilization a lot of effort to produce, big round rocks, okay, it might make sense to use big round rocks as money. But if you encounter another civilization that has like, stone, like machinery, like carving tools, they can make big round rocks very easily, right? They can like make money, very, very, very easily. And so, yeah, that is going to happen with gold for sure. I mean, it's sort of like constantly happening. We're inventing new ways of digging up gold and finding it and refining it and all that stuff, and that always happens. And it's been happening. It's going to continue to happen, and it's going to include asteroids and whatever else. The bet you're making, if you're someone like me who's holding some wealth in gold, the bet you're making in that regard is that the technology isn't going to basically be like a discontinuous curve. Like, it's going to be like a smooth trajectory, something like that. It's not going to be a curve that goes like this and then jumps and then all of a sudden, advances that way. So it's going to be like somewhat continuous. Like, we're not going to all of a sudden have some technology that allows us to like a Star Trek replicator where we just like press a button and then we have like a bunch of gold that just sits there out of nowhere, right? So I'm basically making the bet that that's probably not going to happen. Or if it does, such a technology would bring so much prosperity to the world that I don't really care about my money anymore, right? So I don't really need money because we have replicators. Amazing, right? Like, it'd be like so much prosperity for everyone. So, anyways, I think Michael Saylor makes an interesting point. I mean, it's pretty strongly worded. It's interesting to consider a very extreme view, and it's also interesting to consider, your own risk tolerance, your own risk level with gold, with Bitcoin, with your monetary energy, with everything. And, ultimately you got to make a personal decision.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned something earlier about, money being a kind of a language, and I've kind of agree with that. I've said that over the years, and it just dawned on me, like, man, the guys who invented Esperanto, I forgot who it was, back in the day, and tried to create a universal language, right, that everybody could easily learn and use. Bitcoin kind of is that new thing, right? Everybody can use it. It doesn't take much to understand it, at least not to understand how to use it. To understand it takes a lot of brain power and time, really, to understand it, if you look back. But at a high level, to use it and understand how to use it doesn't take any. It's pretty simple, especially since more and more companies are supporting it. So at any rate, I don't want to dive into that too much, but I thought that was interesting.
I'll say on that subject, the people that are skeptical of Bitcoin, they don't have historical appreciation of protocols. Like, they think like I even see a famous hedge fund manager saying, well, Bitcoin is something and someone will invent a better version of it one day, it'll replace it. And it's like, well, dude, do you not realize that railroad tracks are that width because Roman war chariots were that width, and 2,000 years have gone by and nobody managed to change the railroad gauge? Right. Good luck with that. Protocols last, TCP/IP last, English language last, all of these technical protocols and weights and measures. We have things that go back thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They go back 2,000 years before Christ. And we're still stuck with certain of these protocols, because once they get in to the civilization and everybody agrees that they're going to use those protocols, it's a basic common sense idea. Even Warren Buffett articulated it, but he didn't understand it as a protocol. When he says brands have value, the reason Coca-Cola as a brand has value is because 1 billion people on the planet have in their head that the word Coke means something safe I can drink that tastes fizzy and good. And when 1 billion people have it in their head, if you were to nuke all factories, all distribution, the entire supply of Coca-Cola, everything on earth, the idea of Coca-Cola in the head of 1 billion people has value. And you have to murder the 1 billion people and start again with the civilization to replace the brand with something else. And so the Bitcoin brand and the protocol for moving money around is something which very well can go for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years.
Yeah, this is a really powerful point here that he's saying. Basically, Bitcoin is a protocol, and like so many protocols throughout history that we still use today on a regular basis, protocols are hard to change. They're very hard to change. Once they become absorbed and adopted into a society, they're very hard to change. And part of the reason that Bitcoin is becoming adopted is because it is so many orders of magnitude better than the alternatives. Bitcoin is thousands, millions of times better than fiat. And it's tens or hundreds of times better than gold at being money, right? Obviously not for, electronics or aerospace and so forth, right? It doesn't have the industrial application, but as a monetary application, Bitcoin is the best thing we've ever invented by far, and it is orders of magnitude better. That is why it is being adopted. Now, could we create something that is orders of magnitude better than Bitcoin? Yeah, I mean, like, conceivably, eventually, of course we could, but it's really hard to do that now. And the types of changes that people are talking about and have been making by forking Bitcoin and coming up with alternatives are, well, first of all, arguably not even better at all. But if they are better, it's maybe, twice as good along one particular dimension, such as block size, but then 10 times worse along another dimension, like security. Like, they're making trade-offs that are kind of like fatal trade-offs. So, I would argue that there really isn't another cryptocurrency or digital money of any kind that is better than Bitcoin, much less 100 times better. I don't think there's a single one that's better. And in order to, defeat Bitcoin as a brand, it would have to be 10, 100, 1,000 times better. And I don't think there's one that's even better at all. So, yeah, basically, I would agree with Michael's point here that it's going to be very hard to surpass Bitcoin in that way.
Do you think there's a future of decentralized mining for Bitcoin where you're not going to make a ton of money, but you'll be supporting the network, right? The virtual power plant would be the centralized thing that is maybe earning the most money, but individuals could be running nodes as a lot already are.
I think it's most likely that it's going to scale up and it'll be containerized, like people building these big shipping containers that are full of miners that have thousands of miners in a container that they can ship anywhere on Earth and just drop on a pad. And I think it'll migrate in these containers to the edge of the power network. It's going to migrate to the place where you're not going to be stealing power from Manhattan where you're competing against human beings, because human beings are going to bid more for the power. Like, it's worth, for example, you would pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour. You would pay $1 a kilowatt hour. You would pay $10 a kilowatt hour if your choice was to do it yourself or do it with the mule, right? Or buy electricity. So human beings are always going to pay more for the power. You have to go to places where there is power and there are no human beings. Places where the humans can't consume all the power, and where the power is either stranded, where we have to keep producing it. We can't stop producing it. And there are no human beings, or there's no other uses of the power. And then presumably, it'll be some combination of, I find renewable power, in a place that's very cold, so my cooling is free. What you really want is infinitely renewable power stranded in a place where it's freezing, and I don't have to pay to cool the thing. I drop and there are no people there, and I run a long line there, and I just mine Bitcoin. And offsetting that will be, these containers will be moving because politicians will be changing the laws, and they'll be seizing them. They'll be taxing, they'll either tax them, they'll outlaw them, they'll seize them, or they'll leave you alone, and the rates will change. And so I don't think it makes a lot of sense to build fixed mining capacity, because eventually the politicians will tax you.
Basically, I agree with what Michael is saying, that the incentives around mining are such that you're going to see huge mining operations, right, economies of scale, that are going to go to places where you don't have to pay for cooling, so naturally cold weather, where you don't have to compete with humans for the actual electricity, because humans will always outbid machines, and places where the actual power itself is very cheap and ideally renewable, and probably low tax countries or let's say favorable political climates. So it's probably unlikely that we see decentralized mining. Keep in mind that like people running full nodes is very different than mining. So I'll just throw that out there for anyone who's not sure. So like I could set up a full node right here in my office, but that wouldn't produce any Bitcoins. It also would be much less energy intensive. So yeah, I think we'll see a proliferation of people running full nodes. I mean, there'll be individuals running those nodes all over the world. I think mining is likely to go the direction that Michael is talking about. And yeah, mobile containers that can be, bought and sold. So imagine a shipping container full of, Bitcoin mining rigs that can just be sold. You sell your rig, here's $1 million. I'll buy a Bitcoin rig from somebody, and very, very interesting marketplaces will take shape, I'm sure. And another super, super, super important dynamic at play is the incentives surrounding governments mining Bitcoin. So absolutely, without question, there will be governments who mine Bitcoin, number one, and who essentially use taxpayer dollars to pay for the energy costs. So either the governments will subsidize the energy for corporations to mine Bitcoin and then have some type of, taxation structure, or the governments will mine the Bitcoins directly. Those that are technically savvy enough and so forth. But we absolutely could see a situation in which governments use their own fiat currencies, which they can inflate as a form of taxation, to generate the capital required to set up mining rigs and pay for electricity so that the governments can generate their own Bitcoins for their own personal expenditure, or their own government expenditure, I should say. That's going to happen. It will be very, very interesting to watch the dynamics unfold, because there will be a lot of things that happen sort of at the margin, and with voters and with legislation and with different regime changes. It will be fascinating to watch. There will be very interesting things between secrecy and transparency. Basically governments choosing to do things publicly versus privately because, they specialize in keeping secrets, and blockchains in particular, the Bitcoin blockchain is public. So it will be a very interesting dynamic to see those two forces at play in the future.
All right, so we can wrap, but before we do, any motivational words for folks that should get into to Bitcoin? I know you've been great at calling people out, top level people that should get in, but in general, to the public, any motivational words of why they should pay attention to this thing called Bitcoin?
Look, I think Bitcoin's a bank in cyberspace. It's, and your choices are you save your money in a traditional, conventional fiat bank, and you're going to watch your purchasing power dwindle down over the next decade to the point where it'll buy nothing. Or you can gamble in the stock market that's maybe rigged against you, and if it's not rigged against you, then you'll be buying companies that are generating cash flows in fiat currency that is collapsing in value. So even if you think you've avoided the problem of currency weakening, of storing your money in a bank, you haven't really, because if you're buying real estate, bonds, or stocks that also generate fiat currency, and that currency is collapsing in value, you've got the same problem. Now you have a fiat derivative. Or you can save your monetary energy, save your purchasing power and your wealth in Bitcoin, which is not a fiat derivative, that is not collapsing in value, that is going to appreciate against all these other currencies as they collapse in value. And you don't have to gamble on whether or not Apple will ship a good iPhone 14, or, the next generation of this product or that product or this service, or what that government will do to this company and what that CEO will do. All very complicated, anxiety-inducing. Bitcoin is a simple thing, right? You're buying into a thermodynamically sound engineered monetary network, the first workable monetary network in the history of the world, or first digital monetary network in the history of the world. It's a gift. Once in 1,000 years, do you actually see the invention of a fundamentally new thing this is our once in a 1,000-year opportunity. You get to buy into it early. You know, what would it be like if you owned 10% of all the electricity that was ever going to be pumped? Or what if you could buy 1% of all the running water that's ever going to be pumped, right? That's what this is, right? It's 1% of all the fire that's ever going to be lit. You have a chance to buy a percentage of the future. Seems like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of describing it. Like, Bitcoin is basically, you know, a digital utility in the sense of, like, you know, imagine owning 1% of all the water or all the fire or something like that. It's a good way to think about it. And you know, he also makes a good point about speculating on stocks. And I think at this point in time, you know, the year 2021, we sort of take it for granted that, okay, if you're saving for retirement, you invest in stocks. And people don't question it, right? The average person doesn't question it. Of course, yeah, what stocks you got, you know? What stocks are in your retirement account? That's actually very strange. In a healthy society, you wouldn't have to essentially gamble or speculate on these companies that you probably know very little about. Most people don't even know what companies they're invested in. They don't know who the CEO is. They don't know, you know, they don't know very much at all about the company. That's really bizarre. That's not healthy. That's not healthy from an individual perspective. That's not healthy from a societal perspective. And it's also not healthy from an economic perspective because companies shouldn't be generating proceeds. They shouldn't be raising capital from people who have no idea what the company is about. That's not healthy at all. And it's really a recipe for, you know, a disaster, to be quite honest. And a much healthier system would be just saving, right? When you go to work, and you do work, right? Using that economic term, right? A force multiplied by a distance, and you do work and you exert energy. You want to capture that energy in money, and then you want to save it until you want to release it again to entice someone else to do work for you. Right? Yeah, make me a sandwich or, you know, whatever, pour me a coffee, whatever it is, right? Whatever you want to buy with your money. You basically want to store your energy for a long period of time until you feel like releasing that energy again. And maybe that means retirement, or maybe it means, you know, whatever. And in a healthy economy that uses a healthy monetary system, you can just save money forever and never invest it. And you'll always have enough. You'll always have enough because the value of your money will grow as fast as the economy in the long term. It'll grow as fast as the economy in the long term. Or if you engineer something like Bitcoin that is verifiably scarce, or I should say absolutely scarce, right? It's absolutely scarce. It's not relatively scarce. It's absolutely scarce. The Bitcoin will grow faster than the economy, especially during its growth phase now. Like, people, it's like price discovery phase. People are still figuring out like how much it's worth. Like, how valuable is this asset? Is it going to work? What is it? The gains in terms of energy, which we can think of as dollars, right? The dollar-based gains or the energy-based gains or the purchasing power gains are astronomical at this point in time. Astronomical. In the long term, gains will be as fast as the economy grows. So yeah, I mean, it's a beautifully designed system, and it makes a lot of sense. And you know, every day you spend in the fiat system is a day that you're leaking value. You're letting your energy leak out of the system, and you'll never get it back. So that's why pretty much all my wealth is in Bitcoin, and why I own essentially zero stocks, basically zero stocks, because I just don't know anything about the companies. And you know, for a good monetary system, you can just save money. That's it. And you're very well prepared for retirement. So that's what I choose to do. So thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. I would absolutely love to hear what you guys think. Do you think money is energy, right? Does that make sense to you? Do you think that Bitcoin leaks value at all? Do you think that there's a problem with the code? You know, how likely are we to find a bug? You know, what percent of your wealth is in Bitcoin? Right? 0%, 100%? Are you over levered? You know, let me know in the comments section. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you in the next one.